Yeah. His Excellency Secretary General of OPEC, dear His Excellency Mr. Minister, dear friends and colleagues, thank you for joining us today. The Center of Analysis of International Relations, more briefly Air Center, organized a conference which is entitled Energy Issues in Post-COVID-19 World. And I again would like to thank you all panelists, all speakers, high-level officials who join us today in this very acute and important topic. Let me briefly to present today's speakers. So first, we have His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Sanusi Barkindo, Secretary General of OPEC. Thank you very much, sir, taking time. And I felt that today is even holiday and you still came to the office and joined us. We highly appreciate that. And then we have His Excellency Mr. Pərviz Şahbazov, Ambassador Shahbazov, Minister of Energy of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for joining us. We have Bakhtiar Aslanbeyli, Vice President for Communications, External Affairs, Strategy and Region at British Petroleum, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey. And then we have Dr. Brenda Schaffer, Adjunct Professor at Georgetown University, joining us from Washington. Then we have Dr. Robert Cutler, Senior Research Fellow for Energy Security and Director of the Energy Security Program at NATO Association of Canada. He's joining us from Montreal. We have the members of OPEC Secretariat. Thank you very much. And we from the Air Center, me, Farid Shafif, Chairman, and Board Member Esmira Jafarova. Well, I'll give very brief introductory remarks and then we'll go to the speakers. As we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic indeed put a lot of strain on countries. We're speaking about quite sharp decline in economic activities and related to that also the effect on energy consumption. In time of crisis, indeed, cooperation at international level is very vital and important. And indeed, we've seen kind of ups and downs of that kind of international cooperation. Speaking about the energy matters, energy issues, we've seen in March a sharp decline, and then in April, the continued decline of energy prices, especially we're speaking about the conventional energy sources like oil and gas. And unfortunately, the event, the results of the meetings of OPEC Plus, that was the consequences. The agreement was not reached at the meeting in March, but then we've seen upward, and the further meeting in upcoming month in April and May. And we've seen the trend, the oil prices now going up. And the latest meeting, OPEC Plus, also quite promising. The countries decided to uphold, to support their commitments. And I would like also to note that in terms of OPEC Plus, Azerbaijan was one of the, and President of Azerbaijan was one of the supporters and initiators of that format, OPEC and Plus. Without any further delay, I would like to give the floor to Secretary General, Mr. Mohammed Barkindo. Floor is yours, sir. We would like to hear your input. We have a lot of questions, by the way. Our today's seminar has video streaming on the Air Center Facebook page. We have a lot of people who sending the questions and the comments, and also the Azerbaijani version translation in Azerbaijan also available on YouTube. So, sir, floor is yours, and probably you can assume that the questions, what's your view on the future cooperation of among the OPEC Plus countries, and I have some specific questions. Perhaps after the round of the first remarks, we will have that questions. Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Farid Shaviez, for your introductory remarks and also for your invitation to us to join you at this very timely webinar. It is timely in the sense that we are just in the process of beginning to implement our historic decisions that we took in April, and also in the preparatory stage for some strategic meetings this month. Before I say a few words about the current oil market, I think it's only appropriate, Your Excellency, for me to acknowledge and recognize Azerbaijan's historic and eternal contributions to the oil industry as we know it today. Baku, as we know, was the birthplace of the world's first industrial oil well in 1846. In the industry, we call it oil well number 1. We have, thanks to our friend Pərviz Şahbazov, we have a photo of this large wooden structure in the lobby of the OPEC Secretariat here in Vienna. It is a prominent reminder that some of the greatest early advances in drilling technologies, pipeline development, transportation, and offshore exploration and production all started in Azerbaijan. Your esteemed country has also been a trailblazer in working with international partners and investors in our industry. The Nobel brothers, for example, were early investors in the industry and instrumental in launching the world's first oil tanker on the Caspian Sea in 1877. This great tradition of industrial collaboration and innovation has continued since the establishment of SOCA about 30 years ago. The Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan oil pipeline completed 15 years ago symbolizes the country's position as a vital energy bridge between the Caspian region and key markets beyond, including those here in Europe. The world owes much to your esteemed country for promoting international energy cooperation and for being at the forefront of efforts to ensure sustainable oil market stability. In fact, as you just made reference in your opening remarks, President Ilham Aliyev was the first world leader to call on OPEC and non-OPEC countries to work together in rescuing the oil industry during the 2014-2016 market downturn. President Aliyev continues to be the beacon of light and strong supporter of the OPEC and non-OPEC cooperation. The late Energy Minister, Natik Aliyev, was instrumental in the discussions in 2016 that led to the declaration of cooperation between OPEC and non-OPEC participating countries. His able successor, our esteemed panelist, Pərviz Şahbazov, has continued in the finest traditions of Azerbaijan, providing astute leadership, sophisticated diplomatic skills, and promoting cooperation among nations through his unwavering support of the Declaration of Cooperation. We remain grateful to his great efforts. 16 months ago, Azerbaijan hosted the 13th meeting of the OPEC and non-OPEC Joint Ministerial Monitoring Committee, which provides the strategic guidance to the Declaration of Cooperation countries. The travel restrictions necessitated by COVID-19 interrupted plans for another ministerial conference in Baku this year, following the generous invitation of President Ilham Aliyev when he granted me audience in Davos at the World Economic Forum in January this year. Azerbaijan is also an observer in the Gas Exporting Countries Forum. Its involvement in the GCF is a further extension of Azerbaijan's global engagement in common with many OPEC member countries and DOC participating countries. OPEC, Your Excellency, is very proud to have Azerbaijan in the Declaration of Cooperation and extremely grateful for its high-level support and commitment. As our organization marks its 60th anniversary this year, it would be a great pleasure and an honor to welcome Azerbaijan as a member of the OPEC family. Mr. Chairman, esteemed guests, it has been exactly 3 months to the day since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. On that day, on March the 11th, there were slightly more than 118,000 confirmed cases in the world and about 4,300 fatalities. How times have changed. 3 months later, today, there are more than 7 million confirmed cases with at least some 412,000 fatalities. On Sunday, June the 7th, the World Health Organization reported more than 136,000 new cases of this virus, setting a record for any single day. In the flash of an eye, we have witnessed the worst public health crisis, the most severe economic downturn, and the most alarming oil market slump of modern times. The oil industry is weaker and more vulnerable today than it was just a few months ago. Allow me, Mr. Chairman, to reflect on events of the past few weeks and offer some perspectives going forward. April stands out as a month without precedent in the history of OPEC. We saw global oil demand slump by around 24 to 26 million barrels per day in 1 month. April 20th, Mr. Chairman, was referred to as Bloody Monday for the oil industry. On that faithful day, the price of NYMEX West Texas Intermediate prompt contract for the month of May plunged by a whopping $56 a barrel to nearly minus $38 a barrel, the first time the benchmark has ever fallen into negative territory. Mr. Chairman, for a brief moment, producers had to pay buyers to take their oil. Brent crude, the international benchmark, dipped to $19 a barrel, down by around 72% from where it started the year. Overall, in April, the ICE Brent contract plummeted 21% month on month, while the NYMEX WTI contract lost 45% of its value amid bearish market sentiment. Furthermore, there was a real risk that oversupply would have added a further 1.3 billion barrels to global crude oil stocks, nearly exhausting the available worldwide storage capacity. Assuming we hit bottom during Black April, we are not out of the trough yet. Our analysts at the Secretariat expect severe global economic downturn this year, with the economy contracting by 3.4% compared to global GDP growth of 2.9% in 2019. The most recent forecast from the World Bank reveal an even more pessimistic GDP growth outlook of minus 5.2%, while the OECD just released their forecast showing minus 6% growth for 2020. These downside revisions merely reflect the high risk and associated gloomy uncertainties. We project a historic decline in world oil demand of nearly 9.1 million barrels a day this year to around 90.6 million barrels a day. Before COVID-19, Mr. Chairman, we expected world oil demand to top 100 million barrels a day in 2020, up by 1.08 million barrels a day from 2019. How times have changed. Investment is another significant concern as we navigate through the rest of this year. Our projections show CapEx in non-OPEC countries plummeting by 23% in 2020 to about half the $741 billion record set in 2014. Energy is among the key commodities most affected by the pandemic-induced slump. As we know from the oil market's sharp downturn in 2014-2016, unpredictable investment flows have severe long-term consequences for the industry. It takes years to reverse the damage caused by the loss of highly skilled jobs and technological know-how, along with setbacks in exploration and production. Mr. Chairman, I can speak for OPEC member countries in pointing out that sudden dips in revenue and unpredictable investment make it a Herculean task to finance economic and energy diversification, which are so important to current and future development of our member countries. These uncertainties also affect current operating budgets at a time when additional support is needed to strengthen health systems and stimulate economic activity. The road ahead is cluttered with many uncertainties for the economy and the energy markets. Yet, despite the many downside risks, we are already seeing evidence of reduced volatility in the oil market. The prices of both Brent and WTI have now bounced back to the levels we saw before the lockdown measures were enacted around the world, with both benchmarks now oscillating around $40 a barrel. I believe a large part of the stabilization we have seen over the past few weeks can be attributed to two interconnected factors: the unparalleled actions undertaken by the countries in the Declaration of Cooperation to arrest the market collapse and restore order, and the unprecedented support we have received in this process. His Excellency Pərviz Şahbazov played a leading role in these achievements, often displaying his extraordinary diplomatic finesse and acumen. In a series of marathon virtual meetings between April 19th and 12th, the Declaration of Cooperation participants agreed to undertake the largest oil production adjustments in history. The resulting adjustments of 9.7 million barrels a day for the month of May and June, followed by a tapered adjustment until the end of April 2022, were designed to halt the market's dramatic slide and provide a platform for stabilization, recovery, and growth. The 23 DOC partners held our second significant series of virtual gatherings last weekend with a watchful eye on the ongoing market uncertainties. On June the 6th, the OPEC and non-OPEC conferences extended the April oil production adjustments for a third month to the end of July and reaffirmed the 2-year window of the adjustments. Furthermore, the ministerial meetings unanimously reiterated all participating countries' commitment to achieving full and timely conformity to the adjustments. For the first time since the DOC inception in 2016, the countries subscribed to the concept of compensation by those that were unable to reach 100% conformity in May and June. These countries now have a means to make up the difference in July, August, and September. This key outcome lends further support and credibility to the market. The participating countries also strengthened their monitoring mechanism. which is a main contributor to the DOC ongoing success in responding to the changing market conditions. The Joint Technical Committee and the Joint Ministerial Monitoring Committee of OPEC and non-OPEC participating countries will meet next week on June 17 and 18th and maintain a regular monthly meeting schedule for the remainder of this year. Mr. Chairman, the declaration of cooperation has been a game changer for the industry. I believe the market will be in a far more fragile state today were it not for the powerful response mechanism provided by this unique and voluntary framework. From its beginning, the DOC has strengthened our flexibility and preparedness. It has allowed a diverse group of oil-producing nations to work together to ensure a reliable, economical, and secure energy supply to the benefit of producers, consumers, investors, and the worldwide economy. Yet, the sheer scale of COVID-19's impact on the oil market necessitated a broader collective support. In the lead up to our decisive DOC meetings in April, the leaders of the world's top oil producing nations, along with energy ministers of the G20 countries, called for unprecedented levels of cooperation and encouraged us to act decisively. There was overwhelming consensus that coordinated action was needed to avert a market collapse, which in turn would have devastating economic consequences on all of us. Oil industry majors and independents, national oil companies such as UF, have added their voice of support, and in many cases have taken market-driven steps that have complemented the DOC-led stabilization efforts. Leading policymakers, analysts, and industry stakeholders welcome the outcome of last weekend's OPEC and non-OPEC meetings. Building on this momentum, OPEC has carried out a series of discussions with stakeholders in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, in India, and China to strengthen understanding and awareness. We have also held regular discussions with select universities, think tanks, and the finance and energy institutions and agencies to exchange information and perspectives and encourage deeper cooperation. Today, OPEC and its member countries are stronger, more nimble, and better positioned to confront extreme challenges like COVID-19, thanks to our cooperation and engagement with others. We have also grown stronger because of the visionary decision of the OPEC and non-OPEC participating countries to establish the Charter of Cooperation nearly ago in July 2019. The Charter offers a platform to go beyond market balancing efforts and address issues such as climate change, the energy transition, and energy access in a coherent and inclusive way. Mr. Chairman, we cannot predict what will happen next with COVID-19. We can hold out hope that there will soon be a vaccine against this virus, that our industries and businesses will recover quickly, and that we can resume the daily routines as we knew them a few months ago. Our experience in confronting the market risk posed by COVID-19 underscores the importance of high-level and multilateral cooperation. We must not lose the opportunity to work towards broader and consensus-driven solutions that are beneficial to the industry and ultimately the entire world. Our door is always open to others who share our values, concerns, and hopes for a better future. Mr. Chairman, I would like to close with a very apt saying from somebody who I believe you are familiar with, the legendary Nizami Ganjavi. Nizami said, and I quote, "In the hour of adversity, be not without hope, for crystal rain falls from black clouds, unquote. Your Excellency, I once again thank you and thank my friend Pərviz Şahbazov for giving us the opportunity to participate with you in this very important and very timely conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Indeed, was quite comprehensive presentation about the current situation, and I would like especially thank you for your introductory remarks about kind words about my country, Azerbaijan, which is indeed was one of the pioneering places of the oil industry, and the role which current and past leaders played in cooperation between oil energy producing countries. I also would like to highlight that during this very challenging time, leading such organization as OPEC, where we know that with all the challenges and sometimes the different opinion between member states, it really requires a profound skills, experience, and leadership, which you really exhibited as a Secretary General of this organization, to come to certain consensus. And you mentioned the fact that the oil bounced back to the $40 US, and I believe that your personal experience also played a role in that the countries with so many diverse backgrounds and diverse views on the energy market reached consensus. Thank you very much, Secretary General. I really appreciate. Now let me give the floor to His Excellency Minister Pərviz Şahbazov, Ambassador, and to give the bit more maybe national perspective on what's going on in the COVID-19 crisis with the energy issues. The floor is yours, Mr. Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, dear Ambassador Shafiev. I would like to express my thankfulness for the invitation to participate at this important forum, which is very timely organized and touches upon important and topical issues. And also, I would like to greet all the participants, all the speakers of this discussion, and my thanks also go to Secretary General, my dear friend Mohammed Barkindo, for very kind words in address of my country and the whole work we do here. And let me also note that the Secretary General is not only the Secretary General for OPEC, he is also the Secretary General for OPEC+. So we consider him as the Secretary General for all the countries participating in OPEC+ format. And again, would like to use this opportunity to extend my gratitude for all the activities you carry out in a very professional manner. Coming to the topic of our discussion, although Secretary General Barkindo has, of course, talked about the OPEC activities, but I cannot avoid this opportunity and not speak about the OPEC+, the activities and the role of Azerbaijan in it. But before I will turn to this topic, I would like to mention that, of course, pandemic is stressful. It has brought a lot of hardships, problems, and we all do fight this evil. But we all hope, and as we can see, we slowly coming out of this problem in everywhere in the world, and we see that this problem is going to be manageable. And at the same time, the question, quite reasonable question, is what will happen afterwards? And specifically, if we turn to the energy issues, I have to mention that the energy community is, at this specific juncture, is trying to shape the outlines of the future of the energy, to discuss the energy transition, to trying to forecast what will happen in the future with the energy transition. So, of course, during the pandemic, the oil market, specifically the oil market, faced several serious problems. The Secretary General listed almost all of them, but at the same time, let me again, even if I repeat it, but stress the most important problems we have faced. Of course, it is the overall economic recession, but at the same time, the low oil demand and the sharp drop in oil price. And of course, the missing the chance to agree upon the activities of OPEC Plus in the beginning of March. And due to some disagreement among the OPEC Plus members, the situation was very much aggravated. But it was just enough to be without any adjustment mechanism. It was just enough 1 month to be without any adjustment mechanism in order to understand that the excuse me, the international oil market indeed needs the adjustment mechanism in place. It was one important outcome that we all understood, and everyone understood also the importance of, in this specific case, of OPEC Plus. So that's why all the difficulties the short period of time during the pandemic and absence of this adjustment mechanism, which brought us to the unprecedented volatility about what Secretary General was talking in the oil market. And of course, it increased the unemployment situation. It brought to the closure of a number of industrial companies. It was also the serious shrinking in investments and decline in oil profitability and a lot of financial losses. However, on the 12th of April, OPEC Plus reached an agreement and again put in place this adjustment mechanism, and this started to work, and the result today is evident. And during these difficult times, as again the Secretary General mentioned, we all recognize how important is the role of OPEC Plus in the future, and in order to have this active role of this institution, in the future, the oil market, one has become clear. We need the further the enlargement of this institution. We need more countries, more producing countries to join to this initiative. And exactly during the pandemic time, during that difficult time, we acknowledged the great interest from many countries who not only were praising the activities of the OPEC+, but who also expressed the wish to join with their own voluntary cuts to the organization. And as a result of this very close cooperation with those countries, we had the level of production cut, not only at the formal number 9.7 million barrels per day, but almost twice bigger number. And of course, it was the great achievement for that time. And here I would like again to underline the role of the OPEC+, let me say, Secretariat, led by His Excellency Mohammed Barkindo. But as it has already been mentioned here, the forecast indicators for the 2020, unfortunately, are not encouraging because of this situation and the reduction of almost 400 billions of investments in the energy sector, and the reduction by consumers of the expenditures for about $1 trillion, and the cut of costs almost by 25–30% among the companies, oil and gas companies, who are carrying out the exploration and production works, and the representatives of the BP, our friend, the Mr. Dr. Aslan Beyli is here and can probably confirm those figures, brought us to the very difficult situation. And if we take the profit losses globally in the oil and gas sector for the year of 2020, so it is forecasted at the level of $1.8 trillion by some the experts. Of course, in this situation, they are the risks that the future investments can go under, that there can be the lack of the future investments in the oil industry. And if the decline in the shale oil production has been stimulating the market in the recent months, in the long run, if prices will stay under the $50, it will be, of course, another point that will affect the international oil market. So, having said that, I would like also to touch upon the gas sector. Gas has become increasingly popular hydrocarbon energy source, and the reasons for this are very simple in my view. First of all, this energy source is much more friendly environment for the environment. And we have at the moment the large gas reserves throughout in the world, and transportation issues resolved, and there is an extensive network of pipelines, as well as the LNG infrastructure, and the gas price is not that high as it was before. So it speaks for this energy source to be the one of the important components of the energy mix in the future. But even having all these advantages for this the energy source, the gas, I have to unfortunately state that the global gas consumption is forecasted to decrease by 4% in this year. Let me also tell a couple of words about the environmental issues, about the climate change. As a result of pandemic and this slowing the economic growth has led to the improvement of environment. According to various estimates, this year's carbon dioxide emission will decrease by 8%. It makes 2.8 gigatons. No conference, no summit on Earth could perform better and faster. Yeah. But at the same time, we can bring other examples. For example, if we take the European Union Green Deal project, of course, we welcome such projects. And this project is planning the large investments. In the next decade, they plan about 1 trillion euros in order to achieve the ultimate goal of zero emissions by 2050. It's outstanding, the plan, but now the question arises. What is more important, to boost economy or implement the Green Deal? So in this specific time and in this specific situation. So quite a difficult question, but somehow also we have to find the answers to that. I will also make some remarks on the renewable sources of energy. And here I have to say that the renewables are today actually the only type of energy for which demand does not fall. So here we have the demand growth for 1%. And of course, the falling of the prices for the renewable energy sources, let's take the solar for 80%, and for onshore wind for 39%, and for and offshore wind for 29% in the recent years. And at the same time, the fact that such projects they will be realized and enter into the fixed price contracts and receive privileged terms of connection to the network, make, of course, more attractive in the future energy mix. And I have to say, of course, that in spite of the the fact that the demand for this type of energy for the renewables are growing on the level 1%, but as a result of pandemic and the economic decline, we can see here the shortage of the production of equipment, some delays in construction, and delayed investment decisions. And it is expected that in the 2020, the installed capacity of solar energy will decrease by 10%. And here I would like to look from the national perspective and talk about the development of renewable sources of energy in Azerbaijan. So under the leadership of President of Azerbaijan, Mr. Ilham Aliyev, Azerbaijan has set up the target to get the share of renewable sources of energy in the overall electricity generation in Azerbaijan by 2030 at the level of 30%. So today we have the 17% as a share of renewable sources, including the big hydropower stations, but adding more, first of all, solar and wind power in the future to the energy production capacity of Azerbaijan. We are going to increase this level up to the minimum 1,200 megawatts in the country. So we have developed a new law on renewable sources of energy, which brings a lot of the experiences and best practices to the Azerbaijani legislation in this sphere. And at the same time, we have initiated the realization of two the pilot projects in the total capacity of 440 the megawatts, the 200 for solar energy and 240 megawatts for wind. So these two projects, in spite of the all difficulties we save for the time being in connection with the pandemic and economic slow, they are progressing further, and we plan in the coming autumn to lay foundation of both these projects. So, and having said that, I would like to tell you that in the recent years, we have realized a number of the serious big the project in the energy sphere, inside the country, but also we have developed a number of international and regional projects, and it has been already mentioned here, the Southern Gas Corridor and other the oil and gas projects. Maybe we can talk about it later. But the one last point that I would like to mention in my introductory the remarks is that Azerbaijan is ranked first in the index of energy transition among the CIS countries. And this once again confirms that Azerbaijan is confidently moving in the direction of sustainable energy of the future. Thank you for attention.
Well, thank you, Minister, for also quite comprehensive report. Indeed, we received a number of questions about the alternative energy, resources, and you have addressed them in your speech. Thank you very much. Now we will go further with our speakers. I would like to increase a bit the tempo of our meeting. So before going to the next speaker, I would like you to ask them kindly to limit their intervention to 5-10 minutes, and then we will go to question and answer session, which will be more interactive. As I said, we have video streaming on Facebook and also Azerbaijani language in YouTube. I actually apologize. I've heard there is some technical issues on our YouTube channel, which is fixed by now, but in the beginning, there was no voice, the sound. I apologize for that. Okay, now, Mr. Aslan Beyli, please, maybe you will give a bit the perspective of the private sector, and especially the largest producer, private sector producer, BP, the consortium in Azerbaijan, your perspective on energy development in Azerbaijan and generally in the region. Please, floor is yours. 5-10 minutes, please.
Sure. Thank you, Ferit Malim. Hope the voice is good. Excellencies, Your Excellency, Secretary General Barkinder, Your Excellency, Minister Shahbazov, Ambassador Shafiev, dear colleagues, friends, distinguished audience, it's a pleasure and utmost honor for me to be part of such a distinguished panel and share my views. Obviously, within 5 to 10 minutes, as our moderator suggested, I'll try to briefly talk about the recent challenges in the private sector for the oil majors, and also talk about our activities in the region, in Azerbaijan specifically, during the pandemic period and in the falling oil price period. In essence, there have been two tectonic events in the oil and gas industry in 2020 so far. So the first is that each of the European oil and gas majors have committed themselves to a pathway to the net zero by 2050 or sooner. BP announced its commitment to this goal on February 12th, and in recent weeks, Shell, Total, Eni have followed. The second has been the unprecedented demand destruction and associated collapse in the oil price that we have seen as a consequence of the COVID pandemic. It's fair to say that the oil and gas industry is currently in a survival mode. Talking about the net zero announcement and BP's announcement, reimagining the energy and reinventing BP. In doing so, we are in BP made 5 commitments to achieve net zero, 5 commitments to itself and 5 commitments to help the world to achieve net zero. Those includes elimination of emissions from our own operations, 50% reduction in the carbon intensity of our products, offsetting the carbon emission created by the combustion of our products, installing methane measurement and reduction in all of our sites, and growing low carbon businesses. As we consider BP's future in the Caspian region, we will incorporating these goals into everything we do going forward. Our future developments will have to have a much lower carbon footprint and be more energy efficient to run. Of course, we will look to do this in collaboration with the wider industry, with our supply chain, and most importantly, with the government of Azerbaijan, Minister of Energy, SOCAR, and other state authorities. We touched upon the other distinguished speakers already touched upon the pandemic and pandemic impact into our operations worldwide, and I have to say that it had created certain difficulties for our business, for the projects that we trusted by the government to operate. And taking that opportunity, I would like to thank all stakeholders, specifically government of Azerbaijan, cabinet of operational headquarters under the cabinet of minister, for the tremendous help we received during this difficult and truly unprecedented time. But most importantly, I would like to thank all of our frontline workers offshore and at onshore sites for their dedication and commitment during these difficult times. As a consequence, we have been able to keep all of our projects in Azerbaijan running with incredibly high efficiencies and exporting to world markets. A big thank you to all involved into those efforts. I'm happy to report that we have managed to place all barrels from ACG onto the global market, and that the differentials are coming back to normal trading levels now. Talking overall, the oil price impacts into the oil majors, our response to the collapse in the oil price has been similar to that many oil majors. These are the focus on liquidity, reducing break-even price, and protecting the balance sheet. This has manifested itself in various ways. All companies announcing 20-30% cuts in capex budgets and about 10 to 20% cuts in operating budgets. We in BP targeting 20-25% and about $2.5 billion reduction in capex cost by year-end 21. Our colleagues in Shell have announced a 66% reduction in their dividends. This is the first time since World War II. In certain areas, projects are being cancelled or rephased, and inevitably there are likely to be redundancies and job losses as a consequence across the industry. Whilst it would be interesting to debate the long-term implications of COVID and whether it will accelerate the energy transition, in the interest of the time, I will limit my remarks to BP's immediate plans in Azerbaijan. Firstly, despite the challenging economic environment, BP remains fully committed to its presence in Azerbaijan and to all projects we are trusted to operate by the government of Azerbaijan. Our goal is to sustain our business here for the next 30 years, at least for 30 years, whilst leading the region to a lower carbon future. However, to achieve this, we will need to focus on several areas, and I'll specifically will talk about two areas, in fact. The first one is the Caspian Basin competitiveness. As all companies reduce their capital budget in response to the crisis, the competition for the capital will become even more intense. BP would like to work with the government and with SOCAR and our partners in the supply chain to ensure that Azerbaijan and the Caspian Basin is able to compete for the capital in the future. To do this, we will need to look for ways to reduce costs and ensure that the Caspian remains competitive with other oil and gas basins globally. This will require certain involvement of the new technologies, new operating models, to build a new forms of collaboration, reduction in scope of activity, maximizing the use of digital technology and agile ways of working. And the second area, as I already mentioned before, the path to net zero. Whilst our operations in the Caspian are amongst the lowest for GHG emissions on a unit per production basis, they are amongst the highest on an absolute basis. We will have to work to reduce the carbon footprint of our existing assets while also working to design future projects to net zero target in mind. Then last but not least, a little bit about specific project activities in Azerbaijan. Let me close with a few words on the specific projects. We are continuing to build the ACE platform, which is our new platform for ACG project, a $6 billion project. Although our construction schedule has been impacted by COVID, but we are still targeting the first oil date in 2023. We are aiming to complete the Shafag-Asiman well in first quarter of 2020. You know that we started the exploration well and we full up to speed with our activities and aiming to complete it by end of this year. We intend to drill swap shallow water offshore peninsula project once the rig upgrades are complete, and we hope that this would be possible, and we're looking forward to deliver it by end of this year. We have completed acquisition of seismic for D230 prospect and are fast tracking the processing and interpretation of the data at our supercomputer in Houston. So, and the production in Shahtan is continuing on. Southern Gas Corridor project developed quite within the schedule. So all in all, it is an unprecedented period in the oil and gas industry, but we are proud of how our teams have reacted to the crisis, and we are grateful to the support to our partners, stakeholders, government, and SOCAR for that great participation. Thank you very much for your attention. I will be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Dr. Malin, thank you for brevity. And actually, I received the question about the BP, the projects in Azerbaijan, and you answered them, and quite a quite positive message that BP remains committed for next 30 years to make work, relevant work in Azerbaijan, also to work on the carbon emission reduction. Again, we will come back and you will have more opportunity to make your comments. Please turn off mic. We will go to the next speaker. Next speaker is Professor Schaffer, Brenda Schaffer, very good friend of mine. Now it's about 20 years we know each other. Again, I kindly ask to limit 5-10 minutes. Then during the Q&A, you will have opportunity to speak more about the issues. And I would like you, we spoke about a bit more oil. I would like you to now maybe to focus on gas issues, the natural gas, and it's the prospect during the crisis. Floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you, Ambassador Shafiev and Secretary General Barkindo, Minister Shahbazov and friends. I'm very honored to be a part of this panel and to participants in Azerbaijan in this difficult period. Azerbaijan, Umid Ilayeram Hershe Yakshidir, and appreciate your participation. So a few things on the gas trends. We talked about, some of our participants, about overall decline in demand, but actually natural gas has come out a winner, I believe, of this COVID-19 crisis, because while overall volumes have gone down with all energy sources, the proportion of natural gas has increased. And so it really knocked out in this sort of more luxury market where demand was down and power producers could be more choosy about their fuels. So we saw, really renewables keeping their place, but natural gas in a proportion also actually increasing, and in some places increasing, some places holding its place, knocking out coal. And essentially, we could say that natural gas has proved to be renewables' best friend. So where you see renewables have increased, you saw also an increase in natural gas. And in fact, in the United States, one of the hugest markets, energy market, the most important energy market in the world, despite the lockdowns, the share of gas, the volumes of gas have actually hardly even gone down, and actually its share in power generation went up during the COVID-19 period. So while gas has come out a winner, I think in terms of how the gas is delivered, LNG versus pipeline, I think there are some signs that actually LNG might come out a loser in the long run from the COVID-19 developments, and I'll explain. So the same way that low oil prices knocked out production of the more expensive producers and in the more vulnerable in terms of their balance sheets producers in the United States, we might be seeing something similar among LNG producers where, lower prices for gas over time, despite the demand for gas, might knock out the commerciality of LNG production. It's going to be more vulnerable than pipeline production. And it's not just on the commercial basis, but also with maybe some changes of behavior post-COVID-19, whether it's trade wars, concerns about supply lines, the security of supply lines, trade between China and the United States, dependence on receiving your major power source by sea. We might see less interest in LNG and more in pipeline gas in the future. So obviously good for Azerbaijan, but it's not good for the United States, Australia, maybe the more expensive and newer producers. And there's big geopolitical implications, as I point out, for the Caspian projects, for Southern Gas Corridor, probably the more sort of conditions that are conducive for pipeline supplies. It's probably good for this project, but this could be a major question for how the capacity of U.S. LNGs and U.S. LNG exports have had a huge impact on liquidity of markets, on energy security from markets that were previously supplied by one supplier, specifically Russia, and there might be a threat to this geopolitical benefit of the U.S. LNG. Let's also looking at the European market, we see sort of the same mirror of what I was talking about, that while gas consumption went down during this period, the prospects for imports still are really high. Domestic production in Europe plummeting, and really now we're going to the full force phase of closing of the nuclear generation and coal generation in Europe, which will bring even more demand for gas imports. And again, even as we've seen that natural gas is renewables' best friend, increase in renewables won't hurt the demand for gas. Exactly the opposite. They'll go hand in hand. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Brenda. And now, as I said, we have questions. We'll come back later. And the next speaker, Robert Cutler from Canada. Taking into account your expertise in many Eurasian countries in the Eurasian region, maybe you will speak about the energy issues among non-OPEC countries. We even speaking about non-OPEC plus countries. You living in the country Canada, also the oil-producing country. So we would like to hear that perspective. Again, I kindly ask you to limit to 5-10 minutes. When we'll come back, you will have opportunity for more extended remarks. Floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, dear Ambassador Farida. And I want to thank you also for the invitation, placing me, Ambassador Shafiev Farid, amongst this bright constellation, where I am honored to find myself, Mr. Secretary General, Mr. Minister, and others. I should begin by saying that the views I present are my own and do not necessarily represent those of the NATO Association of Canada, an independent, self-funding civil society non-governmental organization, or of NATO itself, with which I have no affiliation. Bearing in mind the title of the webinar, Energy Issues in the Post-COVID-19 World, I've been asked to discuss energy issues in Eurasia. The easiest way to do this is geographically, starting with Beijing and, as it were, working my way west to Brussels. Concerning China, the question is the nature of its relations with Russia and Central Asia and the role of energy in these relations. Already these relations were problematic before the economic shock resulting from the lockdown that governments enforced following the appearance of the virus. Chinese-Russian relations have not reached the level of strategic cooperation for which Beijing had hoped with the treaty in 2001. Military cooperation has reached its limits, and Russia is all too aware that it is turning into a mere raw materials supplier to a wealthier and more technologically advanced China. The Power of Siberia 2 project has already developed problems. China's demand for imported natural gas has decreased due to its economic decline and increased imports of LNG. Turkmenistan especially has been feeling the effects. The statistic is sometimes cited that renewable energy comprises slightly over a quarter of total Chinese power generation, but the vast majority of this is from hydroelectric sources. China's capacity for investment, as well as production, in non-hydroelectric, excluding nuclear, renewables will decline as its economic decline deepens and foreign direct investment flees for other lands, as international companies reconfigure their global supply chains, and as calls for sanctions due to human rights violations, not just in Hong Kong, gain greater traction. Both these trends were underway for 2 to 3 years before the present situation. China's exit from the crisis, and indeed the whole of Eurasia's exit from the crisis, will be conditioned by the fact that the situation has demonstrated that the role of the US dollar as the global reserve currency is unchallengeable. It will remain so for at least the rest of our lives. The economic and financial consequences of the lockdown demonstrate that cryptocurrencies, gold, the euro, the yuan, none of these is available in sufficient quantity or has sufficient worldwide confidence to play a reserve currency role. These circumstances I mention are important because the structure of the global macroeconomy necessarily constrains the possibilities for the development and exploitation of energy resources, whatever their type. Sovereign defaults and unilaterally declared debt moratoria have already started to take hold worldwide. India has at least the opportunity to come out of the crisis in relatively better shape than much of the rest of Asia. That is because some of the global supply chains fleeing from China are setting up in India, despite even the known infrastructure problems. Moreover, the national demographics of India foresee continued growth of the working age population for decades to come, in contrast to other countries, not excluding China. Geostrategically, it is projected that India will emerge with the world's third largest navy by the early 2030s, also boasting aircraft carriers that will surely patrol the Indian Ocean. Aside from a relative lack of domestic infrastructure, India's main problem is the chokehold that its electricity boards have on electricity production and distribution, and the associated instability of supply for industrial purposes. At the consumer level, it is certainly possible that renewables will help to lift the quality of life of the rural population. The Indian rupee has been surviving the crisis much better than, for example, the Turkish lira. The energy situation in Turkey is extremely complex and not easily summarized, but it is clear that natural gas from the Caspian Sea region is destined to play a greater role there. Let me now jump to discuss some of the concerns of the European Union and Brussels before moving back east from there to finish my remarks speaking about the South Caucasus. The EU is set to use pandemic recovery funds to boost the production of green hydrogen from renewable energy, as well as blue hydrogen from natural gas. However, the cost of producing green hydrogen is still appreciably higher than for blue hydrogen. Although the EU's objective is a full transition to green hydrogen, natural gas and blue hydrogen will still be required for many years to make the eventual green transition less expensive. The coronavirus pandemic makes Central Asian gas exports to the EU even more timely, because that would make its energy transition less expensive. At a time when many other infrastructure projects requiring greater upstream investment are being canceled or delayed, the Trans-Caspian gas pipeline is again appearing on the international political and economic agenda. The current extremely low prices for natural gas make the TCP's construction very affordable and no upstream investment is required. Although the pandemic will decrease energy investment in general worldwide, the EU situation is expected to be different because the EU has decided to apply a significant part of the recovery funds precisely towards the energy transition. The pandemic thus enhances the timely advantages of sending Central Asian gas to Europe. Gas from Turkmenistan costs much less than, for example, gas from Siberia to Europe. As European hydrogen demand develops, carbon captured from Turkmenistan's natural gas could easily be stored in Azerbaijan's depleted hydrocarbon deposits. Azerbaijan could use Turkmenistan's gas to feed its own burgeoning petrochemical sector. Turkmenistan would welcome the chance to export to Europe, but only through a shore-to-shore, fully fledged pipeline connecting its own integrated onshore pipeline system, including the shut-in wells in the east of the country, to Azerbaijan's onshore system. Additionally, Turkmenistan's gas is coincidentally the closest to Europe. Only 300 kilometers separate Turkmenistan's coast from the South Caucasus pipeline, giving access to TANAP and the Trans-Adriatic pipeline. The Trans-Caspian pipeline would also be the signal for other Trans-Caspian energy projects to go forward, just as in the 1990s, the BTC oil export pipeline was such a signal for the South Caucasus and Anatolia. Beyond Turkmenistan, benefits would extend to other Central Asian countries. Plans are on the drawing boards for Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to join Turkmenistan in subsequent Trans-Caspian energy projects. These would enable countries in the region to secure greater revenues from other sources and thus enhance their political autonomy. Turkmenistan's gas is the most economical for Europe. Gas from Central Asia is less expensive than from other sources and fully independent of LNG prices. If Turkmenistan's enormous gas export potential is not realized in a European direction, then it would be in Russia's interest to purchase that Turkmen gas instead and re-export it to the market in China, because this would be less expensive for Russia than developing its own West Siberian resources for Chinese consumption. Indeed, Gazprom has already been instructed to develop a pipeline system allowing such deliveries. Such a development would diminish the autonomy of Turkmenistan and also of most other countries in Central Asia and the South Caucasus. Because of its strategic significance and potential to catalyze further economic growth and reform in the Caspian littoral states, the Trans-Caspian gas pipeline may be the most important project for the region at the present time. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you for brevity. Now we were going to question and answer the session, and I would like to again to thank all panelists, all high officials. I just would like to let you know that the minister and then the Secretary General, we have some our commitments. So I will ask the questions first to them, and then we will have the discussion among experts. And Minister Shahbazov already mentioned about some alternative energy projects, and there was a couple of questions about what's the strategy, and even the one question was there's so many potential in some regions of Azerbaijan, but you addressed that. If you would like to make some further comments about alternative energy. I received also the question from the Report Information Agency. According to this figure, that Azerbaijan fulfilled its reduction commitment in May 98%. So the question, what's the plan for the next month and further on in terms of the commitment, you know, the decision to the OPEC Plus meeting. And the last question, maybe it's not fully in the domain of the Minister of Energy, but the question about any strategy about the use electric cars, buses, generally, the electricity as a source of transportation. I don't know whether it falls under the jurisdiction of the Minister of Energy or Minister of Transportation, but if you have your input or your opinion about that, please. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. First of all, I would like to touch upon the issue of our commitments in the framework on the production cut in the framework of the OPEC Plus. Yes, you are right. We have implemented our commitment on the level of 98% for May, and it is very high performance. Although the 2,000 barrels we are additional to about 2,500 barrels we are planning to cut in the coming month and compensate that 2%. We are stick to our commitments. Azerbaijan has been always very serious about its commitments before the OPEC Plus declaration cooperation, and all those the commitments also in the past have been implemented excessively, but now this time it was an historic and the biggest production volume cut for the OPEC Plus countries, and of course the volume of Azerbaijan was also bigger than it was before. it was 164,000 barrels from the level of production the October 2018 for these 2 months, May and June, and now we added the 3rd month, July. So we fully committed to implement all our commitments in respect to our agreements within OPEC Plus, and we are doing very well in this specific time, and we will also go along with the program which has started in the 1st May, but will go until the April 2022. The next question was about the use of renewable sources of energy in the regions of Azerbaijan. Let me tell you that one of our project, the wind park, is one of 2 pilot project is planned for the in the region of Azerbaijan, Khızı Rayon, and the 3 others in the also in the regions, Absheron, Karadağ, so very close to Baku and Absheron Peninsula. But in the future, we are going to hold the auctions and attract more private companies for the new projects. We are just on the way to develop the special programs up to 2010. So in those projects, the part of them will be in the regions. So I think we have to pay more attention to the regions, and we are doing that at the moment. And another question about the electric cars. Of course, this question is not only for the Ministry of Energy, but it is the question that also covers the different the branches of economy, and we're working on that. And I am sure that in the coming future we will have the better the opportunities for the development of the electric car network in Azerbaijan. But at the same time, we now using more friendly the hydrocarbon. It is CNG in the transport sector in Azerbaijan for buses and other the types of the vehicles, and we are going also to extend the use of this kind more friendly for environment type of the energy source.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I know we have some other commitments. Thank you very much for joining us today and answering the questions. I wish you all the best. I have a lot of questions to the Secretary General. I will try kind of to group them to kind of not to have repetitive questions, but at the same time also I know that you have some other commitments. The question, for example, from APA News Agency, how you assess the situation after the last OPEC Plus meeting? And following that question, it's kind of my own also the question, do you think the OPEC Plus platform should be expanded further? Is any kind of thoughts about that? And related to that, Do you, I mean, is it under consideration further reduction of the global inputs?
Thank you very much, Ambassador Farid. There is no doubt, as His Excellency Pərviz Şahbazov mentioned in his remarks, that the April meetings were a turning point in this meltdown as a result of the impact of the pandemic. For the first time, the oil market and the industry is facing a double shock. In the past, we had cycles, oil cycles, including the most recent one, 2014, 2016, that was largely driven by a supply shock. This time around, it was double in the sense that both supply and demand were impacting severely on the market and the industry. As both of us said in our remarks, for the first time we saw in 1 month, demand was shrinking within the region of 24 million barrels a day to some projections of nearly 30 million barrels a day. Mr. Chairman, once upon a time, this world was consuming nearly 100 million barrels every single day, and it was continuously rising. And the issues of the moment then was, we as an industry, how prepared are we to continue to invest in this industry, to continue to supply the much needed energy source, not only now, but in the future. Now, with the advent of COVID-19, we saw demand shrinking to levels we haven't seen before the last downturn, but we have also seen a surge in supply from producers both within OPEC and outside OPEC. Therefore, the actions that were taken in April were a turning point. All the member countries of the Declaration of Cooperation, including Azerbaijan, decided to take the bull by the horns, as they say, to embark on the largest amount of adjustment ever, 9.7 million barrels a day. This was done consciously to address this meltdown as a matter of urgency. And in addition to this, I would also like to share with you and my fellow panelists that we have seen some of our Gulf members coming out to take additional voluntary adjustments, almost about 1.2 million barrels a day. In addition to that, Ambassador, if you recall, as a result of this supply surge in April, some of these countries, in particular in the Gulf, had to come down from those high levels that they had attained to meet their supply targets in conformity with the agreement that we reached. And that volume was about 2.7 million barrels a day. In addition to that, we have also seen voluntary and involuntary shut-ins, market-driven, in countries outside the OPEC Plus, in the region of about 3.6 million barrels a day. If you do the arithmetic, what we have seen is an unprecedented amount of shut-ins, both within OPEC, within the OPEC Plus, and the global industry, in the region of about 17.2 million barrels a day. Now, I would also like to remind you and fellow panelists that in accordance with our agreement, we had exempted 3 countries because of their special circumstances: the Islamic Republic of Iran, Venezuela, and Libya. Now, if you look at these 3 countries cumulatively, how much in terms of volume that they have shut in so far because of variety of issues that we don't have to go in here, it's in the region of about 2.9 million barrels a day, these 3 countries. So you are behind the envelope calculations will give you nearly 20 million barrels a day in terms of supply adjustment to address this unprecedented slump in demand caused by this virus. So I hope this answers part of your question. If I recall your second question, it's about the current architecture of our collaboration with the non-OPEC. Yes, in 2016, we came out openly, clearly, frankly, to tell you, as producers outside OPEC, that the situation was beyond us. We are a marginal producer. For us to address the imbalance that we saw during that downturn, we needed your support. And thankfully, you came on board. And thanks to President Ilham Aliyev, who was the first public leader to come publicly to call on non-OPEC countries to come and meet with us. And thank God, they all acceded to the call of President Aliyev, and we had marathon meetings and consultations that led to this declaration of cooperation, bringing these 24 countries. And in the last 4 years, we have worked together. We have gained a lot of valuable experience together. We implemented our decisions together. In addition, we also monitored the implementation together. For the first time, we have a committee between OPEC and non-OPEC monitoring in every country how they are complying. Now, this time around, the pandemic, this health crisis, has thrown the world upside down. And we found out that we would need help even outside the OPEC Plus. And we reach out to countries. So the jury is out there, and I think this forum that you are organizing, it's a very, very appropriate forum to discuss how do we go forward? What type of architecture should we have? We in OPEC, we would love to have Azerbaijan in OPEC. Azerbaijan is the cradle of the oil industry. This is where the whole industry started, not in Pennsylvania, in Baku. So this will be our pride. And I remember I told President Ilham Aliyev, not once, not twice, we are still waiting for my brother Pərviz Şahbazov. But on a broader scope, we would like to have, of course, a bigger framework. We have the Declaration of Cooperation framework. It has worked for 4 years. Now we are faced with this unprecedented crisis. We have seen the involvement of countries outside the OPEC Plus. Just yesterday, I had a meeting with Canada here, with the Canadian Minister and Industry. We're going to have next Monday with Norway, and Colombia in Latin America. So we are reaching out and we're asking these questions. We don't have the answers, Ambassador Farid, but this forum will help us. How do we move forward? Maybe our friend Pərviz Şahbazov, before he leaves, if he has not left already, can share with us. Thank you.
He is here. He is here.
Okay, so maybe he can share with us what are his thoughts on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Please, Minister.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me also add, as I mentioned in the beginning, in my introductory the comments. So I see also the OPEC Plus as an institution in the future, effective and able institution only through enlargement. Because look, the OPEC countries and OPEC itself covers, let's say, about 28 or 29, and the Secretary General is here. He will correct me if I am mistaken. So 28 or 29% of the international oil market. So OPEC Plus already just comes very close to the half of the oil market. So we altogether, OPEC Plus cover about 47 or 48 million barrels per day. So, and it is not that easy with the less than half the production to adjust the overall situation in the oil market. So for the proper balancing of the oil market, and in situation like we faced with the pandemic just few months ago, and in case we have any other extraordinary the cases or situations in the future, we have to be able to tackle with those situations and to be more able and more effective. In order to be able to do that, of course, we need the further expansion, and it is. I think this is the issue of the time, and it will come in the future. So we, from Azerbaijani point of view, very much support this idea, and we think that this OPEC Plus platform is very appropriate place we can where we can have more participating countries, or we can even go further and have the new another form of the cooperation. The form is not so important in that specific issue. The substance is important. So we need enlargement, we have to work, and that's why the reaching out by the Secretary General, I would like again to praise his activities. He is doing that all the time, and in using all the opportunities. I support that, and I think the time will show us the OPEC Plus will expand in the future, and it will make us more efficient. Thank you. And using again this chance to address all the speakers, I would like to express my thankfulness for this very interesting and helpful discussions, and to all the speakers of the panel, and also our chairman, my friend, Ambassador Shafiev. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, for joining. Again, thank you very much for your input into this the meeting. I would like now to ask Mr. Secretary General, Your Excellency, do you have any comments? I know that you have also to leave before we will continue with the our speakers.
Thank you, Ambassador Farid. I want to join Pərviz Şahbazov in really thanking you for organizing this very important forum, especially at this time. It is very timely forum with very eminent speakers and participants. And I really look forward to participating in future editions of this forum. It's extremely useful, and we can work together between your organization and OPEC to see how best we can optimize the use of this platform that you are providing us. I hope our contributions have been useful to other speakers, and I sincerely apologize that I will not be able to stay till the end of the discussions. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. I really appreciate your input, your leadership, and thanks to, I think, as a country, Azerbaijan as an oil-producing country, which economy depends on energy sources like oil. I think the decision which was made under your leadership was very vital for upholding Azerbaijan's economy. Thank you very much again, Excellency, and I appreciate all your staff members for their input. Thank you very much. And let me now continue with other speakers and panelists. We have questions coming, so I'm not able, because I was involved with the moderation, to handle all the questions. I pass the floor to my colleague Esmira to further handle the questions and answer. But before that, I received, by the way, very interesting questions. I would like to give to ask the questions that came. In the context of this current situation, whether you think that the global community should think about decentralized energy system. So, floor, Esmira, is yours, but this is my kind of the question which I caught, which came to my phone. Yeah. Go ahead, Esmira, and then we'll go with Bakhtiar, Brenda, and Robert.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to join the discussion. This question, probably you would like to answer this question one by one, or you would like me to direct the questions that I have for everyone and then reply to this question. Maybe you can answer.
Yeah, maybe they will answer, and then because I know some specific questions come to
Yes.
So then will be addressed to the specific
Yes. Okay.
to the speaker. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you can address this question and then I will give you the specific questions.
Bakhtiar, maybe you're first, or anyone
Who
about
wants
the
to go
centralized
first?
energy system. Anyone who would like to.
So thank you for question, and thank you. Hello, Esmira Khanum. So the question, to be honest, I'm a bit confused and not really get the question what they necessarily mean by that centralized energy system. Is it for the country? Is it for the region? But I do my best assumption that the question is about actually having the specific, less dependent energy system. Obviously, this is if we look at the overall energy market, the energy market is moving towards the green energy, renewables, alternatives, and then the future of the energy industries are definitely will be looking much more different than today. And then it's just a matter of time when we reach the peak demand for the oil, peak supply for the oil, and it's a matter of the time when the overall energy consumption will be moving towards the renewables and alternative area. So in that respect, having the decentralized energy system for each country it really would be again dependent on the system and resources and then the capability and then access to the technology, etc. So it would vary from region to region and from country to country.
Okay, any input, or should I follow on with the next questions?
I just add in general, I think that the COVID challenge illustrated to us how important states are. So sometimes there's been this general enthusiasm that we're beyond borders and we're beyond needing states and this supra-national units. But if you saw, for instance, even the EU, which was one of the the most integrated arenas of states, their borders came back up, not only between the EU and outsiders, but within the EU. There was no questions during this crisis. Should the U.S. be patrolling its borders? Suddenly that issue went apart. Who were populations counting on to provide their medical security? Now we have bigger questions. In terms of globalization of trade. Are we going to, if we have a future pandemic, are we going to allow LNG ships in from port to port, cruise? These were vectors also of transmitting the pandemic. So I think that we're actually going to see more need and more maybe general public acceptance of the importance of the state in the next couple decades.
If I may, it seems to me that it is somewhat decentralized. Now, it depends upon the object of reference and which sector of energy it is. But for example, the creation of new technologies is a decentralized process because these cannot be centrally driven by design. If we're talking about price formation, then even in LNG, we see a global market finally, after decades of sort of emerging with regional price differentials, but there is still, it's coming from the bottom up. And decisions on investment, although they may be driven in some cases by normative considerations, as in the European Union, or by economic planning considerations, as in some other countries, and the planning may be indicative, as in France. It doesn't have to be imperative. These decisions are also taken in the private sector, which is necessarily a decentralization of the phenomenon of decisions on energy production, and price formation. So I believe that again, it depends upon the object of reference, but it seems to me that the energy system, whatever one wishes to call it, is actually more decentralized than it may appear, because what is not decentralized tends more often to pass under the radar.
Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers for their answers. I have a question to Dr. Shafer from Washington, D.C. The question is, what will be the important regional developments in the energy sphere in the Caspian region post-COVID? What are your estimations?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jafarova. I think one of the most dramatic developments that's taken place in the last 6 months in the Caspian region in energy is in the Turkish gas market on two levels. One, the composition of its gas provider. So it's gone from heavy imports from Russia and Iran now to zero imports from Iran, dramatically cutting the imports from Russia. Azerbaijan being top supplier and number two supplier being LNG, and a lot of that from the United States. This development where Turkey could radically change its composition of its gas imports and to two very politically reliable sources was due to the bigger trend of U.S. LNG exports and what that did to markets, but also the building, the establishment of the TANAP and the Southern Gas Corridor. So you see that infrastructure changes can make geopolitical changes. And, we're seeing in front of our eyes in Turkey. And I think now the connection, the building of a pipeline between Nakhchivan, connecting this to the Turkish, larger Turkish infrastructure, BOTAŞ infrastructure, and also to the South Caucasus pipeline, getting very close. This will have two major developments. One, this will increase the energy security and thus the national, the security of the Nakhchivan region by having this link to this market and not just being dependent on supplies that transit from the south. But also this will connect the southeast of Turkey to these supplies coming in from Azerbaijan, coming in from other places, and allow a lot more options. So this is, one of the most important gas, second biggest gas import markets in Greater Europe, having a dramatic change. And again, I think that's thanks to what's happened with US LNG exports and to the establishment of the Southern Gas Corridor.
Thank you, Dr. Shaker. The next question I have to Mr. Aslan Beyli. I think you've spoken about it already extensively, but the question from Report Info Agency wants to know whether you expect any kinds of delays, probably potential delays in the implementation of the projects that you are doing with your company.
Thank you, Esmira Hanım, and thank you for the question to the Report News Agency. I touched upon during my presentation about the projects in the region, and I was just told by my colleagues that some of our local information agencies already quoted, but they, for some reason, put a title only one, actually half negative element of the whole presentation they put in the title. Thank you for them. That's
they
the
know
only
how
element.
to do that. They know how to do that.
Yeah. That's their job.
That the construction of the ACE platform has been delayed by COVID. So that was the only. Let me thank you to them. But
maybe you can
reality,
explain now. That's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, the construction of any platform and construction of any kind of the energy project, they may be delayed. They may be delayed by
Look at they got
regions.
you to focus on that.
Yeah. No, I'm starting with the ACGs. So the production is there. We definitely took the shared the commitment of the government of Azerbaijan regarding the OPEC plus production cut, and that has impact on the May and June. But overall, for the year, for the entire year, we should be very much in line with annual requirement budget. So with ACG, the production numbers shouldn't be different from what is expected by the host government. And in terms of the ACE platform, the schedule can move back and forth, but the completion of the construction and the first oil still on schedule. So this is the positive part. Regarding the Shafagasiman, this year we actually started the exploration, drilling of exploration well, obviously with the difficulties in the pandemic, during the pandemic period, and the difficulties are mainly logistic difficulties, like bringing the workforce, bringing the equipment during the period when the airspace is closed. There is some limitations, but we managed actually to continue drilling of exploration well in Shafagasiman, and we're very pleased that we're on track, and we're expecting to complete that drilling of exploration well by end of this year. With D230, another really good success story, completed the seismic. This is the huge area. This is the biggest area where we conducted seismic during our more than 25 years of existence and operations in the Caspian Sea. The seismic kind of gathering of the data completed, and as I mentioned, at the moment they are fast tracking the processing and interpretation of that data at our supercomputer in Houston. With the shallow water offshore project, pretty much on schedule again, waiting for the upgrade of the rig that is intended to be used for the swap operations. Again, subject to the timing when the upgrade of the rig is completed, we'll happy to continue that. So basically, if we just consider the projects that we projects that we are involved in the Caspian, projects that we trusted to be operated, we continue in full scale. The only project probably impacted, and probably the same, or maybe other news agents can put that in the title again, that was our joint project with SOCAR in Turkey, downstream project. But that was announced early in the year that the final investment decision for that project is moved now to the first quarter of 2021. But in terms of upstream and then pipeline business in Azerbaijan and in the Caspian, in this region, we're pretty much again on track. And I have to thank again the great support by the government, because without government support, it would be extremely difficult to run huge operations and to exercise the huge precautionary measures for our operations. Despite the 3 months of the close down, lockdown, we haven't had any single confirmed positive COVID case in our platforms. We're operating 8 platforms for ACG and Shah Deniz. We're using 3 drilling rigs in the Caspian Sea. We're talking about thousands of people, oil workers, moving onshore and offshore. We increased the shift from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. This is heroic efforts by our people, spending 4 weeks offshore and then returning back to onshore. And part of that onshore time they're spending in quarantine facilities from 7 to 14 days before they go back to offshore facilities. So it's actually heroic efforts by oil workers, office workers, great support by the government. And the real pleased outcome of whole of that efforts is that our operations remain untouched by COVID, and there's no confirmed case in our offshore platforms. And we're running the trusted projects as on a business as usual and business as routine basis.
Thank you, Mr. Aslanbeyli. I have one final question for Dr. Cutler before reverting back to Ambassador Shafiev for the follow-up, for the concluding remarks. Due to different timing of the epidemic, synchronization of global value chain is different for different parts of the world. For example, Chinese manufacturing sector is aiming to restart precisely when European and North American demand is declining for that sector. And how do you think that proportion changing for the nearest future? What are your estimations? Because you spoke mostly about Asian perspective, that will be interesting to hear.
Yes, the observation is a good one. I believe that the phenomenon that needs attention is the fact that global supply chains are being reconfigured. It's to be sure there will not be the demand for Chinese manufactured consumer goods because of decreased spending by consumers in the developed capitalist countries, and especially it's well known that the American consumer drives a great deal of this growth. I believe that one of the reasons that the EU and Germany are so keen on green hydrogen is that although the Prime Minister Merkel doesn't want to recognize it, her close aides and the high political elite know very well that China has been competing for a number of years in Asian markets, using against German industrial base, using technologies that, as a matter of contract, the Chinese government required the German private firms to give over to the Chinese state as a condition for entering the market in China. And the development of hydrogen technology is, in a sense, which Germany will convince the EU to adopt, and which it will probably seek to use the Paris agreements to popularize around the world, with what success we shall see, that it's basically their new industrial strategy. I believe that that's, it gets a little far afield from the question, I apologize. But to come back to the question, the fundamental phenomenon, I tend to, in some of my slightly more academic work, look out 20, 30 years into the future instead of the next 2 or 5 years. And it's very clear to me that there will be, in the next 5 years, significant problems, political problems within the elite in China, clashes between different factions, that this will further diminish the confidence that it's only my opinion, that China has lost already through during the COVID months, and that consumers and manufacturers are looking to elsewhere. Now, this will take 5 years, this will take 10 years, this will take 15 years to reconfigure the global supply chains. But in my humble opinion, and please, anyone will disagree, that China's lost the game. Their age pyramid is working against them. India has a better, I think that I would look to India for in the longer term, in 15 years. I apologize for going on at such length. I'm not certain whether I answered the question, which was more short-term oriented. I will, and if I have not satisfied the person who asked the question, I do promise to try again if I'm asked to try again with a clearer focus on the question itself. But thank you for the opportunity to share some of those issues.
Thank you, Dr. Kakler, but the question was mine, so you completely satisfied my curiosity.
Good. Well,
so,
then that's
thank
wonderful.
you. Thank you to all the speakers, and I'd like to revert back to Dr. Shafiev for concluding remarks. Thank you.
I would like to thank all speakers, but before the conclusion, I have one more question. And yeah, you know, we received a lot of questions, by the way. The kind of we built this webinar on because of the presence of the Secretary General of OPEC around the conventional energy sources. The question came about alternative energy, etc., the electric cars. This is definitely the new trend. But I would like also to refer to Professor Schaffer. We had conversation with you, you remember, that we have to utilize, I think it was your point, that we have to utilize conventional sources before going to the alternative, because you believe that in the current circumstances, alternative is a bit more expensive, needs more investment. But also, I don't know whether I'm not expert in that kind of expert on energy. I believe now a lot of conversation about electric cars, buses, etc. But and you know the online, especially COVID-19 brought this topic, the online education, everything online business. But that means the consumption of energy, and still the cars need batteries. Batteries should be charged. I think there is a relevancy of the conventional the energy resources. And I'm trying to be a bit optimistic. Yes, we will suffer for the next maybe 1 year, maybe next 2 years from this COVID-19, but eventually everything will go back to the normal, maybe new normal. So what's your view and about this kind of proportion of alternative energy sources and natural?
Okay, thank you. First thing, I think we need to be really careful when we hear all these phrases like energy transformation, transition, the end of OPEC, right? And we see there's a really big slogans. And when you see how many times this doesn't materialize or how slowly it is and how important it is, you know, like you can, even when you say like renewable energy, let's say you say in a certain market has doubled, great, it's gone from 1% to 2%. You know, you need to be really realistic, you know, you know, specifically what should guide us on how to get to more renewable energy, how to have lower environmental impact, lower climate impact. One, as you hinted about the car, we really have to look at the whole life cycle of many of these different innovations, developments. Not everything that's renewable is green. I'm going to repeat that. Hope students will quote that. Not everything that's renewable is green, you know, so you can have renewable energy with a high high pollution impact, you know, as we have, like, for instance, with some of the biofuels and some of the waste to energy fuels projects, as we discussed about, you know, electrification of transportation. You know, most of the minerals that are mined for use in whether it's the electric wiring or for the car or the batteries are mined in places like Indonesia and India, where most of their mining is done on coal-fired, you know, power. So when you put that into the whole development, I would think, you know, specifically for the gas producers in the Caspian region, like Azerbaijan, I would say that two things, you know, more to invest not in consumption of alternative energy right now, because what does that mean? That means buying a foreign developed, you know, windmill or solar panel and installing it. It doesn't move you forward in any way. Instead of investing in consumption of renewable energy, invest in development of the scientific base for the next generation of renewable energy. So not just buying what someone has produced in China or Germany, but building a scientific base for a whole new generation. You know, like Secretary General Barkindo said, you know, for Baku of the 19th century should also be Baku of the 21st century in the energy sphere, and that's not going to be by buying and just importing and installing things. And also the cost calculation to sell gas at a lower value than what you would get for developing, you know, alternative energy. So freeing up gas by more expensive renewables and getting a lower profit, you know, doesn't seem like a winning strategy in any sense. So it can't, you know, it can't be selling more gas at a lower value and paying more for renewable, and again, without it even being, you know, domestically developed in some way, moving your science forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much again for all participants. I think it was the very interesting discussion, and would like to take from the last comment, Brenda, you said that Azerbaijan, and the Secretary General also mentioned that Azerbaijan was the pioneer, the leader of the energy oil industry in 19th century. So hopefully in 21st century, Azerbaijan will come up, will emerge as a leader of, again, the energy sector. You mentioning the science and technology, and indeed the president also acknowledged that we live in post-oil period, and Azerbaijan will diversify its economy. But we really, the reason why I asked the question, because now it's the buzzword, you know, alternative, renewable, but we, I think, should approach this issue with the caution, with kind of smart approach to utilize, you know, our resources and the investment more cautiously. Thank you very much all, and I would like also to thank the Secretariat of OPEC for their input, for their the assistance and partnership. Hopefully this topic or some other related topics which the Air Center is involved, we will have opportunity for other joint exercise, the webinars and conferences. I actually, you know, and it maybe somebody thinks that I'm old-fashioned. Yes, I love the online exercises, the things, but I believe still in conventional meetings, face-to-face, you know, the shaking hands, having the conversation over coffee and tea, and you know, all these networking events. I hopefully when this crisis will be gone, we will have an opportunity to greet you all in Baku, in Azerbaijan, maybe to meet in Vienna, or I don't know, in the Gulf countries, in Canada, Washington. So this is, I think, the way to go. Again, thank you very much to all. I really appreciate, and also would like to thank everyone who listened to us through the video stream. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Shafiev. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
For the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also Izmira for the moderating. So pleasure
Thank
to
you
meet
very
you
much.
virtually after all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.